Welcome to our presentation on biological molecules by Abdul Malik Wemmer, Georgina Widdicombe, Kerry Taylor, Ryan Burgess, and Jessica Ukpokolo.
Proteins are amino acid compounds joined together by peptide bonds. This is why we can also call proteins polypeptides, treating each individual amino acid as a monomer. At the top, you can see a reaction involving two amino acids combining to produce one dipeptide and one molecule of water, H2O. Due to this, the reaction is called a condensation reaction. It is reactions like these that join many amino acids together and create what we call the primary or 1' structure of proteins. The structures of proteins will become progressively more complex and detailed. So, moving on to the secondary structure, we notice that the same amino acid chains from before are now involved in hydrogen bonds in addition to the covalent bonds from before. These hydrogen bonds cause the chains to contort into two specific structures, an alpha helix and a beta pleated sheet. Pleated just refers to the shape's folded arrangement. The tertiary structure involves these structures undergoing even more reshaping as different kinds of interaction take place. These include disulfide bridges, hydrophobic and hydrophilic regions emerging, polar interactions, and ionic bonds. And finally, the quaternary or 4' structure involves the same kind of bonding from the tertiary structure. However, this bonding is now between completely different polypeptide chains, which join together to form the subunits of a protein. This will be that protein's final 3D structure. On screen are some examples of proteins. Hemoglobin, shown under the heading quaternary, is a globular protein consisting of 4 different polypeptide chains joined together. Hemoglobin is responsible for the transport of oxygen in the blood. This requires hemoglobin to be water-soluble. Collagen and keratin are both fibrous proteins. As such, they are required to be generally unreactive and insoluble. Collagen is found in the connective tissues on the body, for example, bone and muscle. Keratin is found in the external structures of some animals like feathers, horns, beaks, and nails.
Oxygen is the third most abundant element in the universe after hydrogen and helium. It makes up the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. We get oxygen from the photosynthesis of plants and specialized bacterial cells called cyanobacteria. This happens when the plants or bacterial cells take in carbon dioxide and water from the surrounding areas, and with the help of sunlight, oxygen is formed. As the plant doesn't need oxygen, it releases it to be used by animals and microorganisms. Use glucose from food and the oxygen found in air and convert it into carbon dioxide, water, and energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Cellular respiration takes place in 4 stages. Glycolysis, where glucose, a 6-carbon sugar molecule, is broken down into 2 molecules of pyruvate, a 3-carbon organic molecule. The second stage is pyruvate oxidation, where the pyruvate molecules enter the mitochondrial matrix and are converted into acetyl-CoA, and the carbon dioxide is released. The third stage is the citric acid cycle. The acetyl-CoA combines with a 4-carbon molecule, regenerating the original 4-carbon starter molecule. The last stage, known as oxidative phosphorylation, is when protons flow through the mitochondrial matrix for an enzyme called ATP synthase to make ATP. Oxygen also accepts electrons and takes up protons to form water.
Carbohydrates. A carbohydrate consists of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. They are an energy-packed compound. They also serve as structural elements such as cell walls in a plant. Carbohydrates provide fuel for the central nervous system and energy for working muscles. However, the energy that is supplied does not last long which is why you will feel hungry every 4 hours or so. Some of the foods that contain carbohydrates include whole grain, fruit and vegetables. Starch and sugars are the most important carbohydrates in a human diet. They are the first molecules made in photosynthesis. Lipids, protein and nucleic acids are formed from carbohydrates. Some carbohydrates are relatively small, with molecule weights of less than 100. Others are true micromolecules, with molecule weights in the hundreds of thousands. Some carbohydrates are chemically modified by oxidation, reduction, or by the addition of functional groups, such as phosphate and amino. There are 4 categories of biologically important carbohydrates defined by the number of monomers. They are monosaccharides, which is a single sugar. They are the monomers from which the larger carbohydrates are constructed. Disaccharides, which is a 2-sugar unit. Oligosaccharides, which have up to 10 monosaccharides, and polysaccharides, which have more than 20.
Lipids, or fats, are a subgroup of triglycerides. The structure of a lipid is 3 fatty acid molecules and 1 glycerol molecule. This is called a triglyceride, which is an ester. Lipids are non-polar molecules, as they have a hydrophilic head, which is polar, and a hydrophobic tail, which is non-polar. The function of lipids are to provide insulation, a long-term energy source, make up cell membranes, which regulate permeability, as this is important as all living things are made up of cells. They are also responsible for the formation of cholesterol, chemical messengers, and maintenance of temperature. Lipids can be saturated, meaning no double bonds, and unsaturated, meaning double bonds. Lipids are mainly found in animal fat, butter, oil, and cholesterol. They are soluble in alcohol and not water, as they are non-polar, and the most important lipids are the triglyceride, phospholipid, and steroid.
Water is made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Oxygen atom is more electronegative than the hydrogen atom, as it has a greater pull on the shared electrons. Oxygen is slightly negative and hydrogen is slightly positive. This allows water to be a polar molecule. Because of its polarity, water is able to form hydrogen bonds. Due to hydrogen bonds within water, water is cohesive. Water molecules are able to stick together. This is an important factor in the transportation of water in the xylem tubes in plants, as it relies on water being pulled up. Cohesion gives water a high surface tension, allowing small organisms to walk on water. Water takes part in many metabolic reactions, such as hydrolysis, which is the separation of water molecules into constituent hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and it also takes part in condensation reactions. Ice is less dense than liquid water because of the orientation of hydrogen bonds. This causes the water molecules to push far apart, creating a lower density. Water is able to provide a stable environment for organisms, as the hydrogen bonds within the water molecules give it a high stability, as large amounts of energy is required to raise the temperature of water.